Some afternoons don't end when the sun goes down. They stay inside you, quietly changing the way you love someone forever. This short story fairy tale is entitled Love's Tale for My Jieun, written by Jesus Pacampara. If this tale stirred something in you, a memory, a dream, or a truth, our Ko-fi, Amazon, and Patreon links are in the description. Support helps us keep writing for you and the ones you hold dear. Jess arrives earlier than the afternoon expects him to. The park is still arranging itself. Light lies unfinished on the grass as if the sun had not yet decided how generous it wants to be. The bench waits where it always does, wood warmed by habit rather than the heat. The green familiar enough that his palm settles to it. Then, without thought, this is the hour that knows him. This is the hour that knows Jieun. On most days, he can feel her before he sees her. A quiet certainty like a note sustained somewhere behind the trees. Today, the bench is empty, longer than it should be. It is not alarming, not yet. It is simply wrong in the way that the clock feels wrong when it skips a second and no one else notices. Just sits anyway because the ritual matters more than the anomaly. He sits because if he does not, the afternoon might think he has given up on it. So he watches the dust drift through a slanted beam of light and thinks about how time can look so busy while doing nothing at all. He tells himself not to check his phone, and he does not check his phone. The leaves overhead stir with a sound like pages being turned by someone who is not reading carefully. Somewhere a song leaks from a passing car, something old enough to feel embarrassed on. It's about sincerity. A love song, probably. There are all love songs if you wait long enough. Jean appears not from the path she always takes, but from the side, slipping into the park as if she had been rerouted by a thought. The change is small, yet Jess almost misses it. Just almost. She is wearing the same quiet expression she always wears here, the one that seems shaped by afternoons rather than mornings or nights. But the direction she comes from not just something loose in him, a sense that today is not interested in repeating itself exactly. They see each other at the same time. No greeting forms, no name crosses the air. There's only a minimal acknowledgement and a lift of the eyes, a shared recognition that says yes, this is still happening without saying what this is. It feels respectful not to name it. Naming things, just as learned, can make them feel obliged to perform. She sits not too close and not too far. The distance is less than yesterday, though neither of them has chosen it. The bench allows it. The bench has always been a collaborator. And for a while, they listen to the park breathe. Just notices how Jieun folds her hands today, fingers loosely interlaced, thumbs tracing small, absent pats. He wonders if she has been thinking about something before arriving, or if she had arrived empty and is filling herself now with light and sound. He does not ask questions. Questions have weights. He isn't sure if the afternoon wants to carry them yet. I thought about pizza, she says suddenly, as if answering something he never voiced. He smiles, surprised into it. Me too. They do not elaborate. The pizza hangs between them with unnecessary richness. He thinks of late nights, cardboard boxes, and grease-stained conversations that matter more because they are unimportant. He thinks of songs played too softly while someone pretends not to listen. Somewhere in his memory, a lyric stirs and steers about loving someone quietly and meaning it loudly. Jieun shifts just slightly, movement drawing her closer by accident. Her arm is near enough that Jess becomes aware of his own breathing, and he adjusts to a correction that is not meant to be noticed, though he suspects it is. The bench creaks, complicit. A breeze moves through the park, rearranging shadows. Time does not advance so much as it deepens. The light grows more amber, not in a dramatic way, but in the way something settling into itself. Just feels the urge to say something that would make sense of the moment. He resisted. Sense can wait, and presence cannot. They sit like this, suspended, while the afternoon learns them again under altered conditions. He thinks about habits and how they begin as choices and end up as homes. He thinks about how love, if it exists here, might look like this, unnamed and unrushed, allowed to arrive from an unexpected direction and still be recognized. When Jieun exhales, it sounds almost like the beginning of a song. He does not know the rest yet, yet he knows that he wants to stay long enough to hear it whenever the afternoon decides to let it be sung. The first word does not arrive bravely. It arrives like a toe testing water. Do you ever notice Jess says, and stops there in the sentence, opening its mouth and forgetting what it wanted to swallow? Jieun turns her head just enough to let him know she is listening and not waiting. She is listening. The difference matters. He feels it settle in his shoulders. Notice what she asks softly, as if the volume might bruise whatever he is holding. He watches a pair of pigeons argue near the path, their movements sharp and ridiculous like dancers who have been rehearsed forever. And anger but not forgotten why. How afternoons like this feel like edited. He says finally, like someone already decided what matters and cut everything else out. She had already considered that. He can tell she's not preparing a response so much as letting the idea sit beside her, seeing if it behaves. And then the silence stretches. Not uncomfortable but exposed. Just feels the old instinct to feel it, to patch over the gap with something clever or safe. He resists. Silence. He is learning. He thinks that it is not a problem unless you treat it like one. They do, says Jieun after a while. It's like being inside the highlight reel for a day and you're not sure you'll remember. The words land and stay. He feels them linger the way certain chords do. Unresolved but intentional, so he nods, more to himself than to her, and for a moment neither of them speaks again. The pause is not empty and it hums. A child runs past them chasing a paper plane that refuses to fly straight. Laughter trailing behind like a ribbon caught too long. The moment fractures, then reseals itself once the sound fades. Just notices how the interruption does not ruin anything. It only proves that the interruption in that afternoon can be touched and still hold. I was listening to an old song earlier, Jieun says, almost tentatively. One of those love songs where nothing actually happens, but you feel everything anyway. He smiles. So the sad ones? Then Jieun laughs, surprised by the sound. Then for the second it feels like the light sharpens in response. The sad ones, she agrees. The kind that make you wonder if loving someone is supposed to hurt a little, or if we just romanticize the damage. That brushes close enough that Jess feels something in him lean forward and curious and worry at the same time. He looks at his hands, at the way the veins show more clearly in his light, as if even his body is being honest without permission. Sometimes I think, he says slowly, we expect love to be productive, like it has to lead somewhere obvious. Marriage, tragedy, closure. Something you can pinpoint and say that was the point. Jieun hums in agreement, a sound that feels more felt than heard, and if it doesn't, she adds, we treat it like a bug instead of a feature. They sit with that, and the park exhales around them, and the leaves shift somewhere. A distant busker fumbles through a melody that might be a ballad if it ever finds confidence. And then Jess feels the conversation hovering at the edge, close to something that could tip them into a dangerous clarity. So he lets it retreat, not out of fear, exactly, but out of respect for the pace, and the afternoon seems to insist on. A breeze brings it with the smell of street food from beyond the park. Oil, bread, salt, hunger, not urgent but evocative. I could eat pizza right now, he says, almost absent mindedly. Jieun smiles and the expression small but sincere. Yes, she says, the kind you eat with your hands even though you promised yourself you'd be neat. The image sticks. It lingers, not because it is special but because it is shared. They fall quiet again, but the silence has changed. No longer a wall, it is a room. Just feels something loose in his chest. A subtle permission granted, and words have entered the air and survived. The afternoon, it seems, had accepted the test and chosen not to end it just yet. One of them stands first, and later neither of them will be able to say who. It happens without ceremony. It is a shift of weight, a knee straightening. Just feels it register in his body before his mind names it. The way music sometimes moves before you realize that you know the song. Jieun rises, brushing her palm slightly against her skirt. Not looking at him as she does, the gesture is tentative, almost apologetic, as if she is asking the afternoon whether movement is allowed. Then Jess follows, not immediately, but without hesitation. He does not announce it. He simply stands in the bench, releasing them, both with a faint sound that feels like approval. For a second, they are side by side, upright, in a world that has been horizontal for so long. The air feels different up here, less intimate and more exposed. It is still warm and still kind. They begin to walk. No destination is named, no suggestion is offered. Their steps fall into uneasy, unconscious alignment, not perfectly matched, but close enough to feel shared. The path curves through the park like a thought that does not know where it is going but trusts itself anyway. Just notices how their shadows stretched ahead of them, elongated and slightly distorted, touching at the edges even when their bodies do not. They pass the old tree with a low branch where someone was once tied a ribbon that faded into nothing over a summer. They do not comment on it. Familiar things do not require acknowledgement to remain true. He thinks of how many afternoons have trained them for this, for walking together without explanation, and for letting proximity be its own language. They stop once for no reason at all. It is not a decision so much as a pause that claims them. Just looks around, half expecting to find a cause, a signpost or a view that justifies the halt. There's nothing remarkable, it's just grass, light, and the soft percussion of life continuing nearby. Jean tilts her head slightly, as if listening something beneath the surface. Neither of them speaks. The stillness feels earned, like a rest in a song placed exactly where it needs to be. Then they continue. The park gives way gradually to the edges of the city. Not abruptly, but with a series of small negotiations. Trees thin, benches becoming scarcer, and the air carries more sound now. Distant engines and voice overlapping without context. Jess feels the city watching them without interest, which is oddly freeing. Here, they are just two figures moving through an afternoon that refuses to hurry. I used to think, Jieun says, her voice treading itself carefully into the space between steps, that wandering means being lost. He considers that, and the pavement beneath them is a warm, holding the memory of the earlier suns. I still think that sometimes, he admits, but maybe being lost isn't the same as being wrong. She smiles at that, a small curve of the mouth as he catches from the corner of his eye. It feels like a reward he has not tried to earn. They pass a storefront with lights already on despite the hour. Inside, someone is arranging chairs, preparing for a night that will matter to other people. Jess feels a flicker of something like gratitude that their afternoon is not about asking them to prepare for anything. It will just simply unfold. And as they walk, he becomes aware of a subtle shift in himself, the nervous vigilance that usually accompanies moments like this. The moments that feel like thresholds has softened. He's not scanning for the right thing to say or the wrong thing to avoid. He's simply here, matching her pace and letting the city scroll like a backdrop of a background track. The melody floats out from an open window, and above them, something old and familiar is a song about loving someone at the wrong time and deciding it's still worth it. Just does not name it. He lets it pass through him, leaving a faint ache that feels almost welcome. They slow again near the intersection, light pooling at their feet as sun lowers, staining everything with gold. Cars pass and people cross. Life resumes its regular tempo around them, but they remain suspended within it, not separate, just unclaimed. Jess then realizes with a quiet certainty that surprises him that walking beside Jieun like this does not feel like going somewhere. It feels like staying, just in a different shape. The afternoon stretches on, generous and unresolved, and for the first time he does not feel the need to ask what comes next. They drift into hunger without answering it. It arrives sideways, not as ache, but as imagery, as if the body is still thinking in metaphors instead of demands. The smell of baked dough slips from somewhere unseen. Just imagines grease, dark paper folded over itself, heat seeping through, and cheese stretching in defiance of gravity. He does not say let's eat. He does not even say I'm hungry. The craving is allowed to exist as a thought, enacted upon like a song you hum without ever playing aloud. Have you ever wanted something, Jieun says, just because the wanting itself felt right? He nods and said all the time. She glances at him then, really looks, and the moment feels heavier for it. Not dangerous, just honest. They slow, they're walking again, as if the street had decided to become a corridor instead of a passage. The afternoon presses in on all sides now, and the light thicker, almost vicious, catching on windows and turning them into mirrors that briefly reflect the versions of themselves that they do not study too closely. I think, she continues carefully, we were taught that love is supposed to pick something or break something or at least move the story forward. Just lets out a breath that might have been a laugh if he had committed harder. Yeah, like it needs a plot twist to justify its screen time. She smiles at the phrasing. The smile lingers longer than before. But what if it doesn't, she says? What if it's just a middle? The word lands with weight. Middle, not beginning, not end. The long stretch people usually summarize or skip. Just feels something in his chest loosen at the thought. He thinks of all the stories that rush past this part, impatient for the resolution, but afraid that the audiences will look away if nothing really definitive happens. I don't know what love even asks for anymore, he admits, surprising himself with the ease of the confession. It used to feel like you needed proof, sacrifice, grand gestures, but now it feels like maybe it just wants attention and presence. The time isn't multitasking. Jieun steps slow until they nearly stop. She does not turn to face him, but her voice lowers as if confiding in the space between buildings. Sometimes I worry that if I don't know what it's for, then I'm doing it wrong. That liking someone without a plan is irresponsible. That's funny, Jess says gently. I worry about the opposite. That if you turn something like that into a plan is how you lose it. And for a moment, the conversation brushes so close to something unnamed that Jess feels the instinctive pull to retreat or to joke or to redirect. He does not, and neither does Jieun. The air holds and the city seems to pause in subtle ways, sounds layering instead of colliding, and then she laughs. It slips out of her unexpectedly, a soft, startled sound as if she had surprised herself with the truth of what she just said. Jess laughs too, quieter but real, and the release of that felt like a small victory to them over the gravity that had just begun to gather. The both of them resumed walking, but the tone had shifted. The middle had revealed itself, and neither of them is trying to escape it anymore. They pass a cafe with chairs stacked inside, a place preparing for tomorrow while today refuses to finish. Jess notices how the sky had deepened, blues turning richer and golds dissolving into something softer. Time is still moving, but it has agreed to move slowly. A familiar song drifts out from somewhere again, and this one's about loving someone, even if it never turns into the thing people expect. The lyrics blur into the noise of the street, but the sentiment lingers stubborn and warm. Jess realizes that this wandering, the talking in near confessions and half laughs, is the center they were not supposed to stay in. The part where nothing resolves but everything becomes possible. He feels closer to June, not because anything has been promised, but because something has been shared, uncertainty, unarmored and mutual. They walk on, letting the afternoon stretch itself thinner and thinner, neither of them rushing to see what waits on the other side. The light begins to change in ways that are impossible to ignore, and yet they do not name it. Gold tints into amber and the shadows lengthen, not dramatically but patiently, like they are practicing on how to live without being noticed. Just becomes aware of the hour the way you become aware of a song nearing its final refrain. Not because it announces itself, but because your body recognizes the shape of the ending before your mind allows it. I like this light, Jieun says quietly. The kind that doesn't beg you to feel something, it just stays honest. Jess nods. He knows what she means. This is the hour that does not perform, it does not plead to be remembered. It simply exists fully and trusts that you have to be enough. He thinks of something that she once said, half sung and half confessed, about love surviving even if everything else collapses. Love stubborn and ordinary. Love that keeps showing off even if the world insists on being difficult. The both of them slow until walking no longer makes sense, until movement feels like an interruption. Jieun gestures vaguely, not pointing anywhere specific. She says let's sit, then hesitates. Somewhere. They find another bench, not the original one, but the one facing the street where the city passes like a river that has forgotten their names. They sit closer this time. There is no pretense left to manage the distance. Jess can feel the warmth of her arm through the thin fabric of her sleeve, and it feels less like proximity and more like alignment. I've been thinking about love, June says, as if continuing a thought that had never really stopped. About how people keep asking what it's for, what it leads to. But I think maybe love doesn't need to win anything. Maybe it already did just by staying. The words settle into him gently but firmly. Love wins all, not because it conquers, but because it endures. Chess lets the idea bloom in his chest. Feels how it rearranges things he didn't realize were out of place. I write sometimes, he says. Then he smiles at the understatement. Little things, not just poems exactly. More like ways of holding moments still. She turns toward him fully now. She says, tell me more. The request lands with weight, not pressure, not permission. Just looks at the street, at the people passing with their separate urgencies, and the way the sky seems to be breathing slower now. Okay, he says, but it's small. She smiles, and just the small ones last longer. He closes his eyes for half a second, not to summon courage, but to listen inward. I wrote something once, begins, voice low, about loving a moment so much you didn't want to own it. Sit beside it and let it be what it is without asking for proof. Jieun's expression softens, something in her gaze brightening without becoming sharp. He continues in the words finding their rhythm. I said that if I ever loved someone right, it would feel like this, like time pausing not because it was told to, but because it chose to. Like the world stepping back just enough just to let us breathe. He opens his eyes. She is watching him with an intensity that feels warm and not demanding. You love moments, she says softly, not outcomes. He laughs barely. I think so. I love them so much I'm afraid of breaking them by asking for more. The silence that follows is different from all the others. This is dense and humming and alive. Jieun reaches out, her fingers brushing his wrist, grounding him in a way that feels deliberate. Then tell it, she says. Not tell me. Tell it. The thing hovering between them, unnamed but present. If you love the moment, she adds, say it. Moments don't disappear because your name is in them and that you name them. They disappear when you're afraid to. Just feel something give away inside him. A careful restraint loosening its grip. He realizes he's no longer afraid of the afternoon ending. He's afraid of only letting it pass without honoring what it has already given. He turns toward her fully now, the city blurring at the edges and the light dips lower, the sky preparing to surrender itself to the evening. Jess draws in a breath, steady and unguarded, and lets the truth rise to the surface, ready at last to be spoken. The words arrive without ceremony, but they arrive whole. Jess does not frame them as a question. He does not brace himself for an answer. He lets them exist the way the afternoon has taught him to exist, present and unprotected. When this afternoon is over, he says, voice steady in a way that surprises him, I don't need it to turn into anything dramatic. I don't need it to promise me a future it can't keep. He looks at her then, really looks, memorizing the way the last light catches in her eyes. I just want you to keep smiling at me like this, to keep being kind to me even when the days get loud, and even when time stops being gentle. The city exhales around them, and somewhere a car horn cuts through the air and fades. Somewhere else a song begins, soft and imperfect, the kind that believes tenderness is strength. Jess feels the moment widen and not stretch but deepen, as if it had decided to hold them properly. I think he continues quieter now that loving someone does not mean asking them to stay forever. It means hoping that they choose to stay when they can, and if they don't, being grateful for the way they once did. Jieun does not interrupt. She does not rush him. She watches him with an expression that feels like recognition rather than surprise, and when she speaks, her voice carries the calm certainty of someone who has already arrived at the truth. You always talk about moments like they're fragile, she says gently, but you forget how strong they are. She shifts closer, the movement unhurried, intentional. Jess feels the warmth of her knee against his, the nearness no longer accidental. Love doesn't disappear because the afternoon ends, she adds. It doesn't need to win against time, it just needs to exist honestly while it's there. He swallows, nodding that he thinks of all the afternoons that taught him how to sit beside silence, how to let longing breathe without strangling it. He thinks of how this one refused to end until he learned what it wanted from him. I love you, he says. Not loudly, not carefully, but just clearly. The words does not fracture the moment. They settle into it like a final chord resolving exactly where it was always meant to. Jess does not look away. He does not apologize for the weight of what he has said. He let it stand unguarded. Jieun's response is not immediate, but it is unmistakable. She reaches out, her hand resting lightly against his chest, as if confirming something she has already said or knew that was there. Then she leans forward and presses a kiss to his forehead. It is soft, unrushed, a gesture older than promises and stronger than declarations. And for a second, everything holds. The city resumes its rhythm without apology. Light continues its quiet descent, and the afternoon, finally satisfied, loosens its grip and allows time to move again. Jess exhales, feeling something settle into place inside him, something that no longer needs to be chased or proven. Jieun rests her forehead briefly against this, close enough that you can feel her breath and the shared stillness humming between them. You don't have to be afraid of loving moments, she said softly. You are already good at loving people. He smiles, the expression easy and guarded, as if it had been waiting for permission all along. They remained there for a while longer, letting the day finish around them, not rushing to define what comes next. It is enough for now to know that the afternoon knew them and that they let it. Poetic epilogue. We did not need to keep the afternoon. We let it leave the way light does, unclaimed and unafraid, certain it had been enough. When time remembered how to move, we carried nothing but warmth with us, the kind that lingers after the hands let go. Love did not arrive to conquer. It arrived to sit beside us, to smile softly and remain without applause. We learned that kindness endures longer than certainty, and that staying gentle is its own victory. And if the world asked what I became, we answered without proof. It stayed with us, quiet and undefeated. This was not a promise made to tomorrow. It was love. Love wins still. Jieun's the spark behind stories like this, clever, unexpected, and full of soul. I make this for her every day. If you enjoyed it too, feel free to like, share, and subscribe.